Hello. So today I've decided to come on to talk to you about the 5 stages of grief. I did not know about these until it was 2012 when I was studying a project in NUI Galway as part of my master's, and I was writing a special report, and I decided time to do it on grief. I was inside the library in NUI Galway and I was going around and I was literally going through the search engine and I was searching the word grief and bereavement to see what would come up, and I actually found quite a few books, which I was surprised about because I guess I never really thought about it too much myself, even though I was going through it. And then I was introduced to an author, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, who has done so much writing and amazing work on grief. And there I read about the 5 stages of grief. So I'm going to try put them down and kind of talk about them and condense them as much as I can. Now, they don't necessarily go in an order. For me, they kind of went in different orders to what her book said, but I'm going to talk about them in the order they went for me. They may necessarily not be in the same order for you. The first stage is denial. Denial, of course, when you are in denial over something that has happened. You may not believe it's happened, you choose not to believe that it's happened, and you're kind of just waiting to wake up from this nightmare that you're having. For me, I was in denial when my brother was in his car accident and we were in the hospital, and I remember the doctors and nurses told us to prepare for the worst, but in my head I was just thinking, no, like this would never happen, Marcus. He has his future planned out. He's so much ahead of him. This couldn't be real. And at the time, ER was really popular and I used to watch it every Sunday. Mum and I used to watch it together after Marcus would go to Garbally, and then we'd sit down together and it was kind of like our treat. And then on a Sunday, we'd watch it together on our own, and then you'd have to go to bed for school the next day. And in ER, like, they always, survived. And then later that night when we were in the hospital, we got called up to another room and Marcus had spent over 2 hours in surgery. And then I remember the doctor and the surgeon and the nurses coming out to us to tell us that Marcus had died. And I remember at that moment thinking, this couldn't be happening, like this isn't true. And I was waiting for the surgeon to turn around and say, but he survived, because I watched ER and I guess I thought maybe there was some truth in that. So that is denial. That's in denial over what has happened. I guess I experienced denial again after my dad died. I got back to my home house around 4 o'clock that morning. Dad died around 2 a.m. and I remember sitting on my sitting room floor, and again I sat there and I thought, this couldn't be happening again. This isn't real. Is this really happening? No, it couldn't be. I'm going to go to bed now and I'm going to wake up and it's all going to be just a nightmare, and Marcus will be inside in the kitchen and Dad will be in the sitting room and everything will be normal again. So that is denial. Stage 2 is bargaining. So it is when you are like begging or pleading or, like, please, like, bring him back to me. Please don't take him away from me. I beg and I will do anything at all. I suppose for me it was begging with God and asking, please, is there anything I can do? I will do it. I won't argue with anyone. I'll promise to study every day. I'll do really well in my exams. If you please just like bring Marcus back to me and bring Dad back to me, I'll do anything at all. And I guess a darker part of bargaining for me was I used to ask God to take me and bring Marcus back, because everyone was absolutely devastated and heartbroken when we lost Marcus. So I thought maybe they wouldn't miss me as much. So I'd say, okay, take me and bring him back. He was just so amazing. But look, that is part of the grief and part of the process. And now I know, and I don't have those feelings anymore, but that's when I was quite a young girl. So it's kind of pleading and begging for something. Or even, like, I suppose in later years, I was begging for a sign. It was like, oh, please give me some sign. Like, please, Marcus, please, Dad, show me you're here, show me you're around, show me you can hear me, that you're supporting me, that you're with me. So that can be part of bargaining as well. Stage 3 for me was depression. It was a reactive depression I had. It was because of what happened to me, so my circumstances. I was always, the way I am now, creative and energetic and bubbly and chatty and just kind of always up for a laugh. And then during kind of 2011, 2012 time, during the time in Galway, I just lost all of that and I just didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't laugh, I didn't smile. I cried all the time at like the most like things, like just the things that weren't even probably that sad. And I just found that I'd lost every motivation. I just couldn't even leave the apartment. I didn't want to do anything. I'd lost interest in absolutely everything, in my studies, in myself, in my friends, my family, my career, like everything. I was just like in such a bad place. And it was a really, really tough time. And it just was a moment in my life where I thought I'd never be able to get back. I did have to go on medication initially. And then after a while I realised I don't want to stay on medication. I want to heal. I want to get past this. I want to get back to like I want my old spark back. So I got off the medication with the GP's advice and help, and I'd always recommend to talk to your doctor. And I started on a journey of counselling and therapy to help me through, because I knew that I had a lot of unresolved grief that needed to be solved for me to move on and to heal properly. And I kind of was okay then for a couple of years, but then a couple of years later things started to get really tough again, and that's when I got to the fourth stage, which is anger. I'm not an angry person. I wouldn't even consider myself an angry person. I don't even have an angry side. Like, it takes an awful lot to rile me up, but I started finding that I started getting really annoyed at myself and really angry at my dad and really angry at my father, or my father is my dad, obviously, my brother. I used to get really angry at the two of them. I was angry at them for leaving me, and, you know, angry at them for not like saying goodbye to me, and angry that they were gone, and then just really like pented anger, but I didn't know how to express it because I just was never angry before, so I didn't really know how to release it. And that, for me, actually was probably the most difficult stage. I thought the depression stage was at the time, but when I went through the anger stage, I actually found that the worst, because I found it really hard to release it. I went through, as I said, I went to loads of different therapy and counsellors and everything, but I just found actually trying to get it out was so difficult. And I think for me, exercise is where I found that I could really express, and I suppose, like, in a way, sweat it out of me. And I had to talk through a lot of the issues that were causing the anger, and look back into my childhood and kind of revisit maybe old wounds that hadn't fully healed, that I didn't really want to revisit, but I had to because it was the only way that I could heal. And then that brings you to the fifth stage, which is acceptance. It's acceptance over what has happened. It's acceptance over losing the people you love. It's acceptance that, you know, you've gone through all these different emotions, and now you've accepted that the ones you love have died and have passed away. But it's also an acceptance in yourself that you can move on with your life, and you can get on with things, and you can be happy again, you can smile again, you can have fun again, and, you know, you can make the most of life again. And I'd say never ever feel anyways guilty for being happy and smiling, because, you know, that's what your loved one wants for you deep down, and that's all they want. They're around you trying to support you because they want to see you back to your happy, you know, fulfilling self. So they're the 5 stages about Elisabeth Kubler-Ross. But what I found for when I was doing all my, I guess, my work on myself and then writing my first book, Broken Love, was that there are, for me, another stage is anxiety. I know a lot of people talk about it all the time, but I got really anxious, and I found I got this really like anxious over something that I had no control over, anxious over something that was possibly in the future but might not even happen, and I would get so wound up that I just would be like sick, because I just kind of got myself so worked up. So I had to look back through the years and see what was causing my anxieties, and again, it was buried grief from even my childhood, from pre-Marcus and Dad passing away, and there was a lot of different things that happened, traumas that I suppose I didn't realise at the time were going to affect me later life, but they did. And I'm still working through my anxiety. It's not half as bad as it was, but it's something that I have to work with and kind of learn to deal with, and learn to kind of move on and move around. Another area that I think is part of grief and loss and the stages is panic attacks. It's also something I suffered. I remember having my first panic attack when I was about 3 years old, and when I think back to that time, it's around the time that my parents were separating. So I didn't realise at the time what it was, because I didn't know what a panic attack was, but in later years I remembered having panic attacks and knowing I've had this feeling before and able to recognise it. So I found panic attacks were another part of grief for me and loss, and it was something, again, I had to work through, and something I had to learn how to live with and deal with, and that clutching pain in your chest where you're being held to the ground because you cannot breathe. And it is so frightening when it first starts to happen to you. But I think when you recognise it's a panic attack, and then you can possibly see what is causing it, and then when it happens, what triggered it, what was it that set it off, and then you can learn to deal with it, and maybe again resolve trauma that has been causing it, and learn to maybe deal with trigger moments again, be it anniversaries, Christmas, special time of year that you know that it's going to come up again. But at least next time now you'll have the tools and know how to deal with it. So there you have it. There's the 5 stages of grief by Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, and some additional stages by me. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope that if you are grieving, you get the help you need, and know that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Grief is probably the loneliest journey ever to go on. We have to remember that you're never alone.